Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. Manjeet Singh from University School of Applied Management, Punjabi University, Patiala. Today, we are going to discuss about a module related to trends in agriculture production and productivity under the paper Business Environment. After completing this module, the students should be able to understand the concepts related to Indian agriculture. Then they should be in a position to understand the cropping trends in Indian agriculture. Thirdly, you should be in a position to understand the trends in the productivity of land. And lastly, the various patterns and the land utilization in India. Now, dear students, the highest portion of the Indian natural resources consists of land, and by far the largest number of its inhabitants are also engaged in agriculture. Therefore, in any scheme of economic development of the country, agriculture holds a position of basic importance, rather utmost importance. This particular module states briefly the main features of agriculture in India and some notable developments which have occurred over the years since independence and their likely implications. Large areas which suffered from repeated failures of rainfall have now received irrigation. New crops have come up to occupy the significant position in the country's production and trade. The agricultural and industrial economies in the country now exert a powerful influence on one another. Problems of rural indebtedness and exploitative practices of the village moneylenders has also come down to some extent. And finally, there is already in the countryside an awakening and the desire for raising of their standard of living. Cropping trends in Indian agriculture and the factors which influence the cropping trends. These are physical factors, economic factors, historic factors, social factors, and the government policy. A variety of crops are grown in India. Cropping pattern refers to the distribution of cultivated land among different crops grown in the country. Cropping pattern reveals the nature of agricultural operations. For example, how much is the importance given to the food crops, how much is the importance given to the cash crops and other types of crops. Cropping pattern is influenced by large number of factors which can be broadly classified into two categories. First is the physical factors. Among physical factors, the most important one is the soil condition, then the extent of rainfall and the type of climate. Natural conditions of the countryside are the most important factors affecting the cropping pattern of a country. Certain kinds of soils and climate are suitable for particular crops and not suitable for the other crops. So, as a result, only such crops are grown in those areas which suit their natural conditions. The second important factor affecting the cropping pattern is the economic factors. These are related to the factors like prices, income, size of land holding, availability of agriculture resources, etc. The prices of agricultural products, of inputs, and of manufactured goods all give a bearing on the types of crops which a farmer will grow and the proportion of land which he will devote to the different crops. Historic factors. At any given point of time, the cropping pattern of a country is given by the history. The early settlement of a man on the land and the evolution of needs and capacity of population through time have governed the types of crops grown and the land earmarked for different crops. Second important factor is the social factors. It includes the factors such as the density of population, the customs, traditions, attitude towards material things, willingness and capacity for change, etc., have an important bearing on the types of crops grown and the area devoted to different crops. Before the attaining of independence, the peasant in India was tradition bound and fatalistic in outlook. Government policy. The policies of the government affect the cropping pattern in a very significant way. Policies relating to the priority given to the various crops, exports, supply of credit, development of backward regions, support price, etc., determine the nature of the crops and the area under them. This table shows the pattern and land utilization in India. The time span which is shown for the pattern here ranges from 2000, 2001 up to 2009, 2010. And the data which have been included in this table relates to reporting area for land utilization, the land which is covered under forests, the land which is not available for cultivation, then land which is occupied in the form of permanent pastures, then land under miscellaneous tree crops, cultivable wasteland, fallow lands, current fallow, net area sown, total cropped area, and lastly, the area sown more than once. Now, this table on the pattern and land utilization in India shows that how the pattern and the land utilization has changed in the Indian agriculture sector since the year 2000. It is evident from the above table that there is not a particular pattern in reporting area for land utilization. There is a little bit variation across the number of years from 2000, 2001 to 2009, 2010. The area covered by forests has increased over the number of years from 69,849,000 hectares to 70,042,000 hectares. There is also an increasing trend in the area which is not under cultivation. Land under miscellaneous tree crops has increased in the first years and started decreasing afterwards. And again, it started increasing, which indicates that there is a fluctuating trend in this category. The area under cultivable land has also decreased over the decade. Current fallow has a fluctuating trend over this period. Net area sown shows a decreasing trend in the initial years and then starts again a fluctuating trend, increasing sometimes and decreasing sometimes. The total cropping area has also increased in the last 10 years. This table relates to the gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sectors. Now, the data given in this table ranges from 1993-94 up to 2011-2012, and three different columns have been taken in this. First is the gross capital formation in public sector, private sector, and the total. Second is the gross capital formation of economy by the industry of use, that also for the public sector, private sector, and the total. And third category shows the share of agriculture and allied sectors in the total gross capital formation, again from public sector, private sector, and total. Now, this particular table shows the data related to the gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sector. Gross capital formation in the agriculture and allied sector shown in the above table are at current prices. The share of agriculture and allied sector in the total gross capital formation has decreased from 6.15% in 1993-94 to 5.70% in the year 2010-11 in the public sector, and from 12.3% in 1993-94 to 8.51% in the year 2010-12 in the private sector. It was maximum, that is 7.64% towards public sector in 2000, 2005, 2006, and lowest 5.5% was in the year 2008-2009. If we talk about the private sector, then the share of agriculture and allied sector in the gross capital formation was highest, that is 14.26% in 2001-2002, and lowest 7.52% in the year 2006-2007. If we talk about the overall share, then it is highest, that is 12.15% in 2001-2002, and lowest was in 2007-2008 when it was 7.51%. It relates to the data with regard to gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sectors for a period ranging from 1993-94 up to 2012-13 at constant prices. Now this again shows the gross capital formation in agriculture and allied areas for the different sectors at constant prices. Then the gross capital formation of economy by industry of use at 2004-2005 constant prices. And lastly, the share of agriculture and allied sectors in the total gross capital formation. This table depicts the gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sector in 1993-94 to 2012-2013 at constant prices. The table shows that the share has decreased rapidly from 1993-94 to 2012-2013. There has been a continuous declining trend in the share except some of the years from 2004 to 2007 in the public sector. Same is the trend in the private sector. It has also decreased from 27.99% to 5.31% over the last 20 years. In the overall share of agriculture and allied sector at constant prices towards the gross capital formation, we have found that there has been a decreasing trend throughout. The above table explains the gross domestic product, that is GDP, from agriculture and allied sector and its percentage share to total GDP from 1954-55 up to 2014-15. The growth rate of GDP, agriculture shows a fluctuating trend. In some years it is positive and in other years it is negative. But overall, we have seen that share of agriculture in the total GDP has declined over a period of time. The various trends and their evaluation. We are going to see the positive points and the negative points of the cropping pattern in Indian agriculture. In the positive points, we have noticed that there has been an uptrend in the agriculture production. The output has grown at a compound rate of 2.7% since the beginning of planning in 1951-52. This growth rate is somewhat higher than the population growth rate. It is, however, much higher than the pre-independence growth rate of 0.3% during the 45 years preceding independence. So, the growth rate is fairly sizable, although not very high. The output levels has also increased much. There is now a little less instability in the agriculture output. Due to the improvement in the techniques of production, there has increase in the productivity. There is modernization of agriculture because of high yielding crops, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, etc. Now coming to the negative points. There are quite a number of unhealthy features that have marred the agriculture scene. The growth rate has been slow and unsteady. The growth rate at 2.7% is primarily due to certain crops like wheat and paddy. Without this, the overall growth rate is much lesser. The weakening of the influence of weather has been insignificant. This is evident from the fact that there is a very little decrease in the variations of output from year to year in respect of most important crops, namely food grain crops. The output cost of agriculture has been rather very high. In comparison with the agriculture costs of advanced countries, our costs are high indeed. And lastly, the agricultural growth has been very uneven and inequitable in respect of crops, regions, states, and classes. In case of certain crops, particularly of food grain groups, the growth rate has differed very widely. Now coming to trends in the productivity of land. Now, certain factors, certain issues associated with this particular aspect. First is large scope for intensive cultivation, little improvement, unsatisfactory trends, and remedial measures. Now, while discussing about the trends in the productivity of land, the first way we look forward is that there is a large scope for intensive cultivation. Now students, there are two ways of raising production. One is by expanding the area under cultivation. Second is by cultivating land more intensively. Now when we compare these alternatives which are available with us, we see that the scope for the former is very limited. We can have very limited ways of expanding the areas under cultivation. No doubt, some additions to the present net sown area at 142 million hectares can be made through the reclamation of degraded land or recovery of land under Desert Act. But the resulting increase cannot be very comfortable or considerable. Moreover, with the passage of time, this resource will cease to be of any importance. On the other hand, there will be rise in demand for the land for the other purposes such as buildings, roads, rail tracks, etc. We need land for expanding our infrastructure, which is also need of the hour. So in those circumstances, we know that we have got very limited options as far as the expanding of area under cultivation is concerned. So what is the way forward? The way forward is that we should devote more and more efforts towards the intensive cultivation. This intensive cultivation can improve the cropping pattern and can further enhance the return in the agriculture sector. Second is that there is little improvement. There is no doubt that some improvement in the productivity of land has taken place. But when we compare it with the global scenario, this is very little as compared to its potential. And more so, whatever development has taken place, whatever improvements have taken place, it is unevenly distributed between the crops and the regions. There are certain regions which have got more output, more productivity thanks to the improved technologies, but there are certain regions which are still lagging behind. So, the greater increase in the yield of land after Green Revolution than before has been of crucial significance for sustaining the higher growth of agriculture production. But for this, the agriculture growth achieved at a rate of 2.7% would have been almost impossible. Another factor is the unsatisfactory trends. While there is no doubt that the trend is towards an increase in the productivity of land, but this improvement has been a small one and restricted one. As a result, the performance in this field remains far from satisfactory. In the first place, the yield per hectare, though more than before, continues to be much lower than what has been achieved elsewhere. This is so even in respect of the crops which have benefited the most from the new technology. Coming to the remedial measures, as emphasized earlier, the increase in the productivity of land is very essential, as there is almost nil possibility of taking in more land for extensive cultivation. There is a need for the proper management of land. It includes degraded lands needs to be brought back to its normal position with soil nutrients. Land should be more scientifically cultivated in terms of preparing the soil, sowing, plant population, etc. There is an urgent need to change to multiple cropping pattern. So students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. Much of the country's fate is linked with the state of agriculture production. We all know that because more than 70% of our population that is dependent upon agriculture. It is all because of the influences of agriculture on vital aspects of people's life, such as food supplies, raw material, prices, and market for non-agriculture goods, and most importantly, the livelihood of large majority of Indians. We have also discussed in this particular module the various trends in the agriculture productivity and the production. These trends have not been very encouraging, though we have seen that production and productivity has improved over a period of time, but there have been certain imbalances which have been created in these productivity and the other trends. There is a vast scope for raising output from the use of better package of inputs that can be gauged by looking at the difference between what can be achieved and what has been attained in the developed countries. Though we had encouraging numbers with regard to 4 times increase in the food production since independence. But thanks to the advanced technology front which is available these days, and when we compare ourselves with the developed countries, our achievements are not that great. But though with regard to India, This increased food production has made India self-reliant, but still, in terms of agriculture, we are still the laggards. We still need to revisit the way our agriculture sector is performing. The kind of cropping pattern even which has been adopted by the Indian farmers, that is also not sustainable. Like if we take the case of Punjab, which is considered as the food bowl of India, we have seen that the kind of cropping pattern which is adopted in that state, that has very long lasting adverse effects. People are dependent only on two crops. Over a period of time, they have been encouraged or they have been using only two crops, that is wheat and paddy. As we have discussed earlier, that the Green Revolution has also affected only two crops, that is wheat and paddy. But excessive emphasis on these two crops is seriously disturbing the water table in that state and the ecological balance also. So the need of the hour is that we need some kind of balance. And for that purpose, we need to shift our cropping pattern. But the present situation is that the kind of agriculture research we are having and the kind of awareness which our farmers are having and the lack of emphasis on their part to understand the wider picture associated with this skewed cropping pattern, this is all a disturbing trend. So keeping all these things in mind, we see that agriculture needs to be reinvented again. We need another revolution which can transform the Indian agriculture sector. We seriously need to consider our cropping pattern and we need to improve the yield in agriculture, the productivity in agriculture in comparison to the achievements which have been made in the developed countries. Thank you.